Forget the slow climb to success. Today, we're showing you how to buy your way straight to a bigger, more profitable photography business.
Welcome to Commercial Photographer, your guide to marketing, creativity, and growth. This is a podcast that helps professional, commercial, brand, and headshot photographers navigate the competitive world of commercial photography with practical advice and actionable strategies to grow your business.
Hello there, Sam. How you doing?
Not too bad, Marcus. How about you?
I'm fine. I see you having a bit of a fiddle with your microphone there.
That's it. Get myself organised.
You're going to take the lead this week, Sam. What are you going to be talking about?
So, a bit of a different approach. So, we've often talked about marketing, a lot about marketing as ways of getting customers, but I'm going to talk a very kind of different approach of getting customers, which is buying another business. So, in this episode, we're going to break down the ins and outs of acquiring a photography business from another shooter. By the time we've finished, you'll know exactly 3 things you need to secure a significant leap in your business. First, you're going to get the knowledge to instantly scale your business overnight. We're going to talk about the move that can double your client roster and your digital footprint without years of grinding out network events. Second, we're going to help avoid the biggest financial mistake that most people make when looking at a business purchase. This simple distinction will protect your cash and save you a whole world of legal bother. And finally, we're going to show you how to work out exactly what you should pay. Forget guessing, we'll give you the no-nonsense methods for valuing their existing goodwill and client list and helping you structure a payment that works for you. Right, Marcus, let's make a start. So a local photographer nearby, maybe, they've built up a good business. Maybe they decide to go back into full-time work. Maybe they decide to retire. Maybe they're moving. And so what's going to happen to that business? So I'm going to talk about, well, what about if you buy it? And, as a way to instantly grow your business effectively by buying another one. And it's something I've used myself in my business. I haven't bought a photography business, but I've bought other web design businesses. I've got some experience of of how it can work and the pitfalls and some of the do's and don'ts and things.
Love it. Okay, let's go for it, Sam.
Cool. And so, Marcus, as usual, why do we start? Why? So why would you want to buy the business? And my answer is simply, it's a kind of shortcut to growth. You've got a pre-done business. If you've got some cash, it's a possible way of starting a photography business. But obviously, if you've got an established business, it's just a great way of growing it, gaining more clients. And we'll talk about exactly what you do gain and what you might pay for that as the time go on. But effectively, it's kind of a shortcut to growth. You can instantly kind of go, oh, I've suddenly got all this stuff, be it clients, goodwill, repeat customers, whatever it is. But you suddenly get all of their assets. And it becomes yours.
Yeah. And you've had experience with that, Sam, as well, haven't you?
Yeah, so I've done it with a couple of different businesses, bought a couple of web design businesses. And they were quite different, with different successes, certainly none have been a disaster. One made more money than the other, but they both have worked well, to be honest. One was just a bit slower than the other. So I think the first thing to think about is, what are you buying? Okay. And the first thing I think is although I'm talking about buying a business, I think what I'd actually say is you don't actually buy the business, you buy the assets. So that's what I've always done. So, most photographers anyway are sole traders, aren't they? So you can't buy a sole trader because it's the person, isn't it? I can't buy Marcus Ahmed, he's a person. So effectively, you're much better buying the assets for the business because that's much cleaner and it saves a lot of faffing, because if you buy a business, that business may have entered into contracts you don't know about, and so you've got to get solicitors to search into and stuff, which could just be a nightmare. They could have debt you don't know about. Well, if you just buy the assets, that doesn't come with any of those tanglements. You just say, I am going to pay you X amount for Y. Yeah. And so you're not literally buying the business, taking on its past risks, taking on its past whatever it's signed. You're completely separate. You're just buying stuff from them. So I think, first of all, that's a good way to go. If you want to buy Argos or something, you probably want to buy the business. But we're talking smaller scale. So I think just buying the assets is great. So what are you buying? You're obviously buying the name. And with photographers, that is often, let's be honest, 95% of the time it is a personal name, isn't it? It is Marcus Ahmed Photography. It is whoever. Some people do have a brand name that's not theirs, but most do. But you're buying the name so that people, even if they don't speak to that person, the original photographer, their website might be there, the name's still there. And the idea is you try and pass that cachet, that reputation onto you. They go to that website and it comes to you. And what we're going to talk about later is you might also keep that photographer on board, maybe just, for chatting to
Right.
clients initially and that sort of thing to help them through. So you're buying the name. Client list is obviously a huge one that you're buying. You're buying a client list, names, email addresses, phone numbers, when they're in that contact, what they like to, photo shoots they had, when they might buy again, all that sort of thing. So you're buying a client list. So suddenly, you might have 80 people in your client list, 50 people in client list, and you suddenly double the size of it overnight. Yeah. And obviously they're not all going to buy a photo shoot next week, but if there's a good number of them there and some of them haven't had one for a while, the photographer you're buying from can probably see, they normally come back for a photo shoot every 3 years or whatever it is. So you're buying a client list too. You're buying kind of goodwill, the reputation, because you're buying the name that kind of comes with it. As well as a client list, they will also probably have a lead list. So there could be a bigger email marketing list, a list of people I've contacted. So, that contact list is definitely part of it. All of these are optional because you might buy just some parts of this. It might be you just decide to buy one small thing. You could be buying a digital presence. So they might have really good presence on Google Maps. They might have a really good website. They might, whatever it is, a really good listing on a different website, but you could also be buying that digital presence. And that could be part of it. And possibly the back catalogue could be part of it. Now, for some types of photography, that might be less relevant. For others, it might be relevant. So it might be you buy the back catalogue and that has a lot of value in itself and that earns interest, money itself. So there's all sorts of options there. And we're not saying there's one way. It could be you just buy one part. Yeah. It could be you buy everything. There could be quite a mix.
I can definitely see how that works in a B2C field, with dealing with consumers. For example, I'm thinking of when they're talking about it, Sam, like the high street photographers we used to have in the 90s, like Olin Mills, and there's just loads of them. Actually, there were quite a few, which you don't see so much, I don't think. I mean, it's not the genre I shoot in, but how do you think it would? Do you think it would work commercial on a commercial level as well, Sam?
Yeah, because it's still business contacts. I mean, when I did it, it's business contacts. I'm pretty much B2B business. Yeah. If it's, the contact book is the contact book, whether it's commercial contacts, as long as it's recent. So, somebody once gave me a contact book as a favor. I thought, these are great. These are all these leads. But it was from a business that had shut down 6 years ago and they were all dead. The people from, not literally dead, but the leads, the people in the company had moved on, the companies had folded. So, as long as it is live and recent, then, I think that's really useful. And I think in terms of what to avoid is don't buy the business, because then you then basically have to pay a solicitor to go through, to do the, like when you buy a house, you have to do the background checks. Same thing, they'd have to do loads of background checks and then that would just wipe out half the value of the business anyway. So what's the point? Yeah. So my suggestion is definitely buy the assets, do not buy the business. Even if it's a limited company, you'd waste so much money on solicitors' fees and blah, 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 that I don't think it's worth it. And you can get yourself in all sorts of trouble because you're suddenly taking on a business that could have signed contracts you don't know about, could have taken on debt you don't know about. And if you're just buying assets, you'd avoid it.
Interesting. So you're saying it's almost like buying an email list from somebody.
Effectively, or a load of other things. And the other thing, actually, I didn't mention what you're buying. It could also be equipment, of course. Yeah, especially if you're a new starting out photographer, could be like, wow, bang, there's my photography kit, done. Or it might be you're expanding and you want to take on a second photographer. So bang, that's perfect. I've now got a second set of kit.
Especially when it's very specialized kit like drone photography or those ones they used to do. They don't do it anymore, of course, but ones they used to do for doing surveying where you'd have your camera on a big pole, or maybe, a printer on site where you print the images at an event and stuff like that. And blah, blah,
all sorts of relevant things. Cool. So then I thought to go into, where do you start? How do you start this process? Well, first of all, obviously, you've got to find relevant photographers. So, I mean, we always talk, don't we, about actually building a community of photographers around you, not so much treating anyone as the enemy, but cooperating and talking. So if you do have that local network, you'll start to know when people are, winding down, aren't they? Maybe looking to do something else. You'll probably hear it on the grapevine. And so, and probably you do want someone relatively local. If you live in Reading, you probably don't want to buy a photography business up in Carlisle or something that, it's probably going to be someone local and you're probably going to have a fair idea of who those local photographers are. Okay. So once you've kind of worked out that somebody is thinking of moving on, retiring, whatever it is, I think the first thing is you've got to build a bit of mutual trust. You've got to trust what they're saying. They've got to trust you. It's got to work both ways, that trust. You've got to start to work out if you can trust this person, and that, you've got to work on them being able to trust you, because, there's a lot of mutual trust, and no matter how many contracts and stuff you draw up, but, eventually it is, you're effectively, give or take, buying trust here. So you've got to kind of trust that person. That's the definite first step. And then for me, always the next step is you both sign NDAs. NDAs are, non-disclosure agreements, because once you've signed a non-disclosure agreements, you can then say, could you please send over your account? So you've then got confidential details about your business, but you've just agreed not to, go and share them on LinkedIn or something.
Right.
So yeah, I think basically signing NDAs allows you then to say, right, and now can we please have some solid data about the business? And then you can start to collect that. So the sort of thing you might want to get, is like how many clients they've got. You'd have to kind of define what a client is, or maybe how many have you had in the last 5 years or 3 years, however you want to put it. You probably wouldn't get the whole client list with the names and addresses and phone numbers till you'd got a bit further, but you could at least maybe ask for details of one or two, just for examples. Can you give me examples of a couple of clients and what they've bought in the last few years? Definitely kind of numbers of clients. Talk about the back catalogue, if that would be included, and what it is if it is. Ask to see company accounts. I think that's really important, so you can actually see what money's coming in, where it's come from, asking where those clients are coming from, because that's really important, because they might say 90% come from the website, and if you're inheriting the website, then you never got guaranteed income, but that means you're quite likely to keep getting a lot of that income. While if they all come from that particular photographer's networking, efforts, that's less likely to pass on. So that's really important. And I think what's really, really important is an idea of how much they want to sell for, obviously, because you've got to, and I'm going to talk for the different ways you can deal with this, but, there's lots of different approaches you can take, but and you can kind of come to a middle, but if you're too far apart to start, there's no point carrying on, is there? There's always, if you're vaguely near and there's quite a bit to go, there's some work. But if you're crazy distance apart, there's no point even going there, is there? Yeah. So then once you've got all that information, you've got to kind of think, well, what will I definitely gain? So I don't know, it might be they've got 10 customers that are on a retainer, that pay every month and do 2 photo shoots a year. So give or take, you're going to gain them. He'll pass them on to you, and you maybe would lose one because they don't want to switch person. But give or take, they're guaranteed. So there'll be some things that are guaranteed like that, and then other things that are more probable or maybes. So like he'd say, I've got these 50 clients, and most of them come back one every 3 years for a photo shoot. So you do the maths about how many people you're going to get each year from this list. Now, that's a bit down to probability, isn't it? You're not guaranteed they're going to come back. The people who are on the retainer, they're probably going to keep paying, and that's fine. But if it's just a client list and they'll probably come back, it's not as certain. So I think it's good to work out what have you got as a certain income and what have you got as a maybe income, and kind of look at both. And then, once you got to there, you kind of then go, is it of interest to you? Have you at this stage gone, this is really interesting, this could be really for me, or no, not really? And then, what is it worth you paying for it? Which is always the challenge. I'm going to talk a little bit about cost. But one of the things about cost is how to deal with it, because it could just be cash paid up front, but it doesn't have to be. So it could also be what I've done a bit of a mix. So cash paid in stages can work really well. So things like, okay, you get this first, and this once this happens, and this once that happened, and that once. So you could have steps. So I did, for example, a certain payment was done once I'd managed to speak to 95% of the clients, which kind of meant he had to help me ensure that I spoke to the client. So my theory on that was those awkward to speak to clients, he would be also contacting and making sure that I could speak to. In the end, actually, most of the clients were pretty good and I spoke to pretty quick. But I was putting stuff in place to make sure that, if the clients were hard to speak to, they could jump in too, because they knew they were getting payment based on this, to help me, speak to them all, make contact with them all. And kind of build that relationship. So staged payments, can definitely, and it could be time staged or they've done something staged. And then the other thing to think about is commission, because if you think I'm getting all of this and actually there's no guaranteed income here, it's actually all just chance, then you could say, okay, so I'll give you a bit up front, but I'll give you a really good commission deal. So then you're kind of both taking the risk, but Yeah, and the more you pay up front, the less you do in commission or none. But if you're kind of going, this is all a little bit, you go, right, okay, let's just make this fully commission, but I'm going to make it a pretty hefty commission, because if it works, then there's an awful lot of work here. But you can also think about time. So it might be I'd give you a hefty commission on year one and like less commission on year two. And by year three, there's no more commission. You work it out for yourself. But there's lots of options there.
Okay.
It doesn't just have to be give a load of cash.
Do you mind saying what businesses you're talking about? Was it the ones you acquired yourself, Sam? Are you prepared to say
the names of them?
No, just what type of business?
Yeah, the web design. So they were both web design businesses. They were both web design businesses. Yeah. So they were both. So they were like a photographer acquiring a photographer. I was acquiring things in my field. So I knew the field. I knew I knew the product. I knew the setup. So it was kind of a natural move.
Gotcha. Yeah. I can see how that could work. Yeah, definitely.
And then the big question is always, how much do you charge? What do you ask for? What might they want? How do you value a business? And I've asked this to loads of people. I said, well, how much do we go for? And, I asked loads of people who are in business, were into buying and selling businesses. I'd met some at networking events. I was like, these people would be great. So I go, how do I decide how much this business is worth? And there was there's no straight answer, which was like, oh, for God's sake. I took as a rule of thumb, which was entirely mine, which was, how much do I think I make in a year? And I'm like, okay, I'm probably willing to pay that. And maybe we could do some commission on top. But I took that as my rule of thumb, especially because for my business, I had guaranteed recurring income effectively. I thought a few people would drop off, but people who are paying month on month who were with them will carry on with me. So I kind of had a certain amount of
you were taking over their existing. Yeah. So taking over existing work that was ongoing, and therefore you could. Yeah. That was pretty much.
Yeah, that's it. And I expected probably, in 20 customers, 1 or 2 would drop off with the move, because you'll always lose 1 or 2 anyway. And it gives them that impetus, doesn't it? We were thinking of doing it anyway. I hadn't bothered. It suddenly makes people think, doesn't it? So you're bound to lose a couple on the way. But yeah, so that was my thought. But there is no fixed answer, really. You got to think about what was last year's turnover of the company, and could, would you pick that up? Like we said, is it to do with where the business is coming from, and will you gain that? How much are they staying involved? So I think that could be important. You don't necessarily want them on a photo shoot, but if it's a named photographer's business and they maybe for 6 months are just available on the phone to chat clients and help to move them over and things, then being involved, part-time like that could be a real asset to help that smooth transition, rather than you just go, no, my name's Fred Bloggs and I've taken over from your great photographer. If he's there and he can talk and maybe go to in-person meeting and kind of almost smooth it through, that can make a big difference, but obviously would change the cost a bit. So yeah, I mean, obviously kit secondhand, if you're thinking about kit, secondhand value of the kit. But then, I don't know what you think, Marcus, but my thought would be, if you're buying all their kit, you'd probably expect to pay less than the market value, because you're buying the lot in one go.
Really would. Yeah, because exactly. It might be out of date and stuff like that, most of it.
That's it. So, I mean, you'd certainly want to look at what it's worth, but then go, yeah, but I wouldn't necessarily buy all of this, and they wouldn't necessarily be able to sell all of this. So you definitely wouldn't pay full market rate on every item. It would be more, let's add up what the market that you should get, and yeah, it would be a big discount, but at least it gives you a starting point. And then obviously there's, in terms of the value, is what are their expectations? And we said before, are they at all close to yours? Because yeah, it can be difficult. Sorry, just looking through my notes now. And yeah, and there's the back catalogue, I guess, as well, and how useful that is. So in some photography businesses, the back catalogue could be dipped into all the time and really useful, but other back catalogues might be, if it's just, a business you've been to every year and you do the company headshots, probably the CEO's headshot from 5 years ago is not something that's got much value and going to be reused, but other stuff could be really good.
Maybe. Maybe. Ongoing thing, photography, really, and it's always changing. Yeah. Maybe. Who knows, Sam? It's all food for thought anyhow, really.
That's it. Yeah, I think it's just something to think about. And then obviously the owner, yeah. What do you say about them staying with you? Do you want them to stay on a bit, like we said, to help with that move on, or do you just want to kind of ask them to, send a few messages and then you're kind of done with it? And that will come into the price as well, because obviously they'll need more if they're being involved for longer. But then if it's commission based, they might want to be to help with the commission side. So, there's all sorts in there to think about. And it's really down to how much you feel it's worth and how much value you think you're going to get and what's realistic and things. And I think we also have to think about with the value, we're actually talking about people's egos and people's lives. This could be somebody who's built up this business for 20 years and it might be worth nothing, but we don't want to, after 20 years work, make them feel that it's worth nothing. You know what I mean? You've got to think about them and their feelings as well.
Yeah, I'm sure.
And I'm not saying that means you pay over the odds, but if you think it's worth nothing, I think it would be better to walk away and say it's not quite right for you than, tell them that their 20 years worth is life's work is worth nothing, if you know what I mean. You've got to be human about this too. They've worked hard on this.
Yeah. Cool. Okay. Very interesting. Food, as you said, food for thought. I'm not really aware that it goes on that much. I think, maybe in photography, you go until you die almost, isn't it? And you can work as a photographer. You can work until you're quite, old, really. I mean, I certainly am old and I'm still working.
I don't think you're that old, Marcus. You can, and some people choose, but some people choose to finish earlier. Some people decide to go back into full-time work. Some people do something completely different and have a change. So there's all those things happen, isn't there? Some people just move and
have enough. And also, I can definitely see, if it's definitely a niche business, like something that's very, very, very tight and very prescribed, and maybe even area specific or something. I don't know. But yeah, great. Very interesting, Sam. Thank you. Well, thank you, Sam, for another great chat. And for everyone listening, you should now be ready to approach a business acquisition with confidence, knowing exactly what you've learned today. Firstly, you know that buying an existing photographer's assets is the fastest way to instantly scale your business overnight, giving you a ready-made list of clients and a stronger online presence. Crucially, we've outlined how to avoid the biggest financial mistakes by only buying the business assets rather than the entire business, which shields you from any nasty hidden debts or contracts. Finally, you've learned practical, realistic methods for how to work out exactly what you should pay, including using staggered or commission-based payments to lower your upfront risk. Cheers, Sam.
And don't forget that you can get for free the Commercial Photographer Guide to Creativity and Marketing. After all, that's what this show is all about. To get your free download, all you need to do is go to our website at commercial-photographer-podcast.com/creativity. Let me do that one again. commercial-photographer-podcast.com/creativity. And from there, you can get your free guide from us to marketing and creativity. It is. There's kind of more, but as you can see, Marcus, we're running out of time. So maybe we'll do a part 2 on this because obviously we then need to think a little about contracts and how you go forwards. But maybe we'll do a second show on the the other stuff, the kind of what to do next. Excellent, Marcus. Right. Well, I'll see you next week.
See you next week, Sam. Bye-bye.
And thanks for listening to this week's episode. If you want to make sure you never miss a show, head to our website and sign up for the newsletter. We'll be back next week with more practical advice to help you grow your business. See you next time.